But what the heck is this piece over here? The original one, we have the disc, the synchronizer, and the cup, but there's nothing on the other side. It was in the bottom of the case in several large chunks, just like that. Holy cow. How did this thing not explode when this entire disc right here came apart and fell down through all those gears? How do all these gears look as good as they do if this stupid thing fell down through there? It just blows the mind how that could happen, and this transmission is still in decent shape. So I've got the case all cleaned out now. I'm going to go ahead and start reassembling it. I was planning on pulling the countershaft out to get it really clean in there, but I've got to pull the reverse idler out to do so, and I need some tapered wedge bar or something the manual said to remove it back here, and I don't have that. So I pulled it up as far as I possibly could. I sprayed 2 cans of brake clean in there. I wiped it out really good, and it's going to have to be good enough for now. I'm going to fill it up with fluid, run it around for a while, and dump that fluid and put fresh in. So hopefully that takes care of it. There's also 2 really large magnets on the drain plug over here, so that should help catch any of the residual junk in there. I removed this PTO side door here, that steel plate. That's resealed and ready to go. All that's left is to install the bearing cap down here over the countershaft. And before we do that, we need to install the shims, which oddly enough, here's the 3 shims that were in there. Look at that one. I have no idea how this thing could have been damaged like that. I mean, there's nothing for it to catch. It sits around the outside diameter of this bearing here. I don't know. It must have been installed improperly from the factory or something weird. Fortunately, however, I've got new shims right here. So I'm just going to measure the thickness of this one, find the appropriate shim in here, and replace it. Here's the original mangled up shim. Looks to be about 3/1000ths of an inch. And oddly enough, the smallest one I have in the rebuild kit is 4/1000ths. We'll put that in there and see if that does the trick. The other thing that I could do is I guess I could stack up, like I said, it had 3 shims in there. All you're going for is a total measurement. I could stack up all 3 of these like this, measure that total diameter, or total thickness, which is 31/1000ths. And I can get an assortment of the new ones and see if I can stack those up to this 31/1000ths. I might try and do that. We'll see. We'll see how close I can get. But this train does have 180,000 miles on it. These are the original bearings. So they're probably honestly worn in a little bit. So it's probably a little sloppy. So that extra 1/1000th will probably be okay. But let's see if we can stack up to the exact amount we had in there to start with. Torque spec on these bolts is 35 to 40 foot-pounds. I went with 40 foot-pounds. Now, the spec right here for the FS6305 is 6 to 10,000ths of end play in the countershaft. So to measure that, I've got a dial indicator set up in here. Sorry guys, I know I'm in front of the camera here, but when I pry it all the way this way, you can see we go back to, well here, let me tweak that. Okay. With the countershaft pried all the way to the front of the case, it is at 0/1000ths, and just letting off, you can see it moved quite a bit. Now when I pry it to the back of the case, I can get up to 0.08, and the spec says 6 to 10, so we should be fine there. 3 hours later, and I'm finally back to where I started. The case is clean, the countershaft is fully installed, the cap is torqued down on the rear, and I'm finally ready to start reassembling the main shaft over here with our new parts on the floor. I spent 2 hours cleaning junk out of the bottom of this case. The main shaft itself is clean, it's stuck in the vise there, and the first thing that's going on is the infamous first reverse synchronizer. And here's the new one. This should look familiar to you, the synchronizer itself and this disc, but what the heck is this piece over here? The original one, we have the disc, the synchronizer, and the cup, but there's nothing on the other side. It was in the bottom of the case in several large chunks, just like that. Holy cow. How did this thing not explode when this entire disc right here came apart and fell down through all those gears? How do all these gears look as good as they do if this stupid thing fell down through there? It just blows the mind how that could happen, and this transmission is still in decent shape. I think this is that metal injected molding. It's a much softer metal. I'm guessing that's the only way this thing stayed alive. I don't know. But here's the new Synchro. It's going together. I'm excited. Let's get going. You can see I've got the main shaft assembled. The next step is going to be to find the correct bearing, I believe it's this one, and press it onto the front of the shaft. I'm not sure yet if I'm just going to set it on there and try and drive it on with a hammer, or if I'm actually going to put it in the press. I don't know. It's going to be awkward either way because this thing's so stinking heavy. I wish I had somebody else here that one of us could stabilize this thing and the other one could drive it on there, but I don't have that luxury, so I'm going to figure something out and get that bearing pressed on there. Sorry, I totally spaced off turning on the camera. I ended up pressing the bearing on the front. Now I need to open up this box, which is the synchronizer for 4th gear and the hub for 5th gear, which will just lock the main shaft straight through, giving us a 1-to-1 ratio for 5th gear. Get that slid over the front, then put my piece of rope back around it and set it inside here. Sling is not far enough forward. Ah! Synchronizer, stay together, baby. Get down in there. Not quite. Come on, baby. Woo! I believe that's back inside where it goes. Well, I'm happy to have that done. Clean up the input shaft, clean up the, oh there it is, the rear bearing holder. Get this main shaft supported, put the top cover on, and it's ready to go back in. Cover now. Much like the countershaft, the main shaft has shims on the rear bearing cover, and I'm going to put some Loctite 510 on there in between every shim and in between the last shim and the bearing cover. I'm just kind of guessing with these shims. I measured the original ones again, and I'm putting the same amount back in there even though we've got a new bearing. I have to pick that shaft up a little bit, I guess, and I don't know. A little tap with a hammer. I really don't know what it needs. There we go. That wasn't much at all, and it went right on. Dab a Loctite on each one of these, and torque them to 65 foot-pounds. Now it says to check the end play in the main shaft before you put the Loctite 510 and the Loctite 262 on. but I'm gambling. I'm gambling it's going to be right. I don't want to take it back apart. If I'm wrong, I guess it's going to be a mess taking it back apart, but if I'm right, I don't have to take it back apart at all. Okay, and the spec on the main shaft is also 6 to 10. You can see all the way back is at 0. And if I pry it forward, we hit 6, maybe 7. I'm very happy with that. It's got a new bearing in it, so as that wears in, it's going to loosen up a little bit more. If I'm rebuilding a transmission with brand new bearings, I prefer to have it on the tighter end of the spec because the bearings are going to wear and you're going to end up with a little more play. If you're going to reuse the old bearings, they have no scoring or no damage on them, then being towards the upper end of the range is going to be just fine because they've already kind of worn into place, if you will. There's not much more that's going to wear off of them and loosen up the tolerance. But when I got new bearings, I like it to be nice and tight, so that way if they do loosen up and it wears in, I'm not out of spec right away. The last thing we're going to do tonight is install the yoke, and I've got a brand new nut for the output shaft. And actually this was supposed to be oiled upon installation. It said the manual specified, you know, what needed Loctite, what needed everything, and it said this should be oiled upon installation. So we'll give it some oil, help it zip on there nice and hard, and hopefully we get it seated firmly. I can't actually torque this to the spec it recommends. The book says 350 foot-pounds. My torque wrench stops at 125. Even though this gun is supposed to have 1,000 foot-pounds of torque, by the time you go through an adapter and you have this giant socket on here, I think it's probably doing good to even have 500 foot-pounds. Alright, we'll get back at this in the morning, put the top cover on, fill it with gear lube, but for now it's 3 a.m. so I'm gonna go to bed. See you guys in the morning. So the next day, it's a beautiful, sunny, 80 degrees outside, which for us is very abnormal, usually in the 60s on October. Here's the transmission. You can see I cleaned up in the garage too. Tractor's out of here. All back together. Gonna dump the oil in before I put the top cover on because it's much easier to fill the transmission by just dumping it in the top as opposed to going through that little fill plug on the side. Now, if you guys are paying close attention, the only thing different visually is this. This piece of metal was not here. This is what it used to look like, and this is what it looks like now. This piece of metal was just gone. Actually, it wasn't gone. It was in the bottom of the case. There it is right there. All those broken bits came from that ring of steel. I guess these joints failed where it's mounted together and it came apart in there, and I don't know. It's a miracle that this transmission didn't blow apart when all that metal fell to the bottom of the case. I'm going to go ahead and dump about 2.5 gallons of this oil in through the top here. Put the gasket on, put the top plate on, and we're going to throw it back in the truck. Can't find my tripod, so I didn't film filling this thing. You can see though, there's nice red tint on top of all the gears. All I did was, I started here and I just went back and forth, pouring 2.5 gallons, just back and forth across the gears, so that the oil would run down through everything on the main shaft. I made sure it got a good dousing in the front bearing and the rear bearing here. And you can see I filled it right to the very bottom edge of the filler plug. Took all of maybe 45 seconds to put 2.5 gallons of fluid in this thing. And here we are the next day. It's now Sunday. You can see the garage is a giant mess again, but there's no transmission in here. Sorry I did not take you along for the ride, but I completely reinstalled it and took it for a test drive yesterday. I was getting pretty short on time and just did not didn't want to mess with videoing it, I guess, and I had help, and I hate slowing down the process when I've got help here. So you can see it's right outside the garage now. It's no longer sitting over where it was, and it was a little eventful actually. We got stuck halfway home. Being the good mechanic I am, I didn't check any of the fluids. I just took off, and it overheated. So we had to sit and let it cool down, and I actually left it and came back after a while. How hard is it to put a key in? There we go. So now we got stranded, overheated, temperature rose up on it. The heater core does leak, and I always knew it did, but I was too excited to go for a test drive, and the sun was starting to set, and you know, one of those kind of things where you don't check it over like you should before you go. Either way, it does shift good. Very happy with the transmission. Looks nice having the floor all reassembled again for once. I've never actually seen it put together. I tested out the dump box and that works well. I'll get air pressure built up here and we'll take off. That turns the brakes off. Sorry guys, I know this is going to be really shaky here just sitting on the dash. My driveway's pretty rough right now. I'm going to have to grade that thing before too long. Going far, just coming down the hill to park it here, get it out of the driveway. And there we are, parked, back down where it sat for the last 2 months. There is more to come on this dump truck. Like I said, the heater core does leak, so I'm gonna have to pull that out from under the dash, replace that. And actually, you can see it right here. We've got coolant running down in the floor mats. So, gonna have to replace the heater core in this. Some minor stuff like the boards along the top of the box back here. This side's broken maybe. I don't know. One of them's broken somewhere. Replace the boards. Do some minor stuff like that. Get it spruced up a bit. Then go ahead and sell it. Thank you guys for watching this. Hopefully it wasn't a letdown. Sorry I didn't film it going back together, but it's been a busy weekend. Busy 2 weekends getting this thing torn apart and put back together, and I was just kind of a little bit over filming it. Wanted to get it done quick, so please have patience with me that I skipped over that if you're wanting to see it. Sorry for that, and please stick around for the next video. Probably won't be the dump truck, probably be something else for a while, but we'll come back to it and do some more work on it. Thanks for watching, guys. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next video.